such a web of life, and every species has such an important part to play, like the strands in the web.
And these species have all co-evolved, and this is just a natural cycle. It's occurred, it's been going on since long before we were on this continent, and it's natural.
These birds are naturally occurring. They've come back to repopulate areas where they existed previously.
They've been around a long time, and they are a part of the Great Lakes ecosystem. It's constantly changing. It's constantly, species have their heydays and then they fall off, they come back.
It's just nature unfolding the way nature is supposed to do. The natural state of a lake island is to have colonial water birds nesting on it. That's the diversity. That's biodiversity. Bio meaning life, diversity meaning different kinds of life.
The ultimate goal is the protection of the Great Lakes ecosystem as a whole, including all of the native species, and one of those being cormorants.
The diverse waterbird colonies that flourish throughout North America's Great Lakes represents an exceptional success story in today's imperiled natural world.
Presque Isle is actually one of the most diverse habitats in all of the province. The Gull and High Bluff Island themselves constitute the biggest and most diverse colonial bird grouping in all of the Great Lakes on either the US or Canadian side. 3 species of herons, 3 species of gulls, 2 species of terns, and cormorants. They've been around a long time, and they are a part of the Great Lakes ecosystem.
After being nearly decimated by the widespread use of DDT and other pesticides following World War II, the recent return of double-crested cormorants to near normal numbers is cause for celebration.
It was stunning. I had no idea what to expect from the cormorant colony, but it was just the most beautiful sight.
I was astounded at how social they are, how they pair bond, how faithful they are to each other, and how vocal they are.
I've studied them at colonies, and I've watched them in all parts of North America, and you look at a cormorant up close and they're actually very beautiful. Huge electric blue mouth lining, the orange gular sac that it has, jade green eyes, this beautiful green, blue bare skin around the eye ring. Just a stunning bird to look at.
Cormorants nest in the branches, and there's probably 5 to 10 nests per tree, and they're all paired up, and usually there's one cormorant on the nest incubating the eggs, and the other either is standing on the side beside them, or they head off on jaunts out to get nesting material, so they fly to the mainland, or they're out catching fish in the lake. It was just beautiful because it's quiet and peaceful except for the birds talking to each other, and there's a lot of almost camaraderie, it seems like, with the colony, and they all are just coexisting and going about their business.
The cormorant's comeback from near extinction is an unequivocal success story, but government agencies have recently come under pressure to implement management practices for the thriving birds.
Gradually, as the pressure came from extremist groups on the government to do something about the birds because they were blaming the birds for eating all of the fish in the lakes, the government started a management program which began in about year 2000 and started with blasting fire hoses into the nests of the cormorants, and then subsequently they moved into other harassment programs, egg oiling programs, and culling.
Dr. Richardson and several colleagues came to Presque Isle Park to document the management program.
I had no idea what we might be preparing for. Oh my gosh. I can see the hunters. And all of a sudden we could see so many of the birds flushing up into the air. There's just sort of a huge cloud of black birds rising up, and we realized that they must have started shooting. It was absolutely horrific.
Well, the entire management program could be best described with one word, and that word's brutal. It was something that astounded me, the level of the cruelty involved in the entire management program, particularly the culling. The level of brutality, the level of cruelty really was quite unexpected.
I felt very strongly that the cormorants should not be culled, and that I was very concerned about the animal welfare issues that might happen. And so as a veterinarian, I wanted to be there. Oh yes, it's been shot right through. I think there's an entry hole here from a bullet just on the left abdominal side here where there's bleeding. Looks like a bullet wound, and then it's gone right through the bird and has come out this side, and it's nicked. Oh dear, I'll show you, Julie. Oh dear. Oh gosh. And it's hit its leg. So, I don't think the leg is repairable. No, it's not.
It's shattered.
Yeah. But, yeah, I think it's, yeah, there's an exit hole here. So it's either gone up here, hit the leg, gone into the abdomen, and come out the other side. Not just wounding it and.
Cormorants have been persecuted throughout history, like loons, mergansers, and other fish-eating birds. But this time, the shocking manner in which thousands of these native birds have been massacred has provoked serious scrutiny.
Of course, the mass cruelty to the birds was of serious concern to a number of wildlife protection groups in the United States and Canada. And so we came together and formed Cormorant Defenders International in an effort to clarify all of the misinformation that was being spread about these birds.
We want to protect any fish-eating birds on either side of the Canada-U.S. border who are being oppressed and suppressed and persecuted. And we just basically work together to try and educate the public, but also, and this is very important, to document what's going on so that the public has an opportunity to understand.
The ministry shot this morning about 30 minutes on Friday, May 27th, and you can see that there are many, many injured birds.
See the dangling leg there, and dangling below the body is it. So clearly that leg is useless.
Here's another one on the shore. Made it on the shore, but it's dying too. I don't know how long it's going to survive. This is going to be a very gruesome day. A very gruesome day.
I saw many birds suffered terrible injuries. It was a terrible thing because of how long you knew that bird would suffer before it would finally die. What the cormorant will actually suffer through will be tremendous tissue damage and tremendous pain and swelling and bleeding. It will also be very anxious. The bird will be confused. It will be desperate to get back to its nest and the eggs and the partner. And with a wing broken, it cannot do anything. So it's got to be just sitting there. And that will cause great anxiety. And then fear, great fear, because obviously a cormorant's best method of defense and survival is flight, and it can't get off the ground. It'll try and get food, which it won't be able to do because it needs its wings for both flotation in the water and for diving down to get fish. And so it will probably starve to death.
Unfortunately, the public has mostly heard a negative perspective about cormorants. Much of the historical and scientific data is rarely, if ever, heard, and so many tenuous claims have led to the cruel condemnation of these native birds.
I think that people dislike cormorants and even in a way fear them. And I think it's because they honestly believe certain myths.
They don't belong here. They're not native.
It's quite clear that cormorants were present in the lake in some numbers in historical times.
McElraith discusses nesting cormorants in his book on ornithology in Ontario from 1886. So he knew of double-crested cormorants nesting in the Great Lakes Basin at that time. Certainly double-crested cormorants occur in the fossil record as well.
I think most of the people who are the critics of cormorants are of an age group that when they were growing up, cormorants were very rare. And they didn't see them, and they therefore didn't believe they belonged, because they simply formed their opinions at a time when cormorants were largely missing in action due to pesticide-related breeding failures. And now, as that particular environmental issue has been improved, and their breeding success increased, we're seeing much larger numbers of them. And there's a subset of people that are very disconcerted by that. But cormorants belong. They are a native bird. They are a native species. They've been around a long time, and they are a part of the Great Lakes ecosystem.
Their numbers are out of control.
They are not out of control, but where they are very, very conspicuous. And they are appearing in places where we don't remember seeing them when we were children.
When I started bird watching in the very early 70s, you were hard-pressed to see a double-crested cormorant on the Great Lakes. It was an event bird. And now I suspect these birds are just coming back to levels that were fairly similar to what would have been on before the Great Lakes Basin was settled.
In the case of cormorants booming, they are doing that because they're reflecting the ecology of the lake around them. There's an enormous population of small fish available for them to feed on.
In fact, all they are doing is responding to what we call the carrying capacity, the ability of the water to support them. But you don't have the continued growth. It has to reach a peak and then level off. And studies right here in the province have shown that, in fact, the cormorants have leveled off.
These birds are eating all the fish.
The Canadian and U.S. governments have both vilified the birds and blamed them for many of the problems with the fishery, when in fact there are far more serious problems.
There's a problem, number one, that we've totally changed the composition of the fish species in the lakes in the 2 centuries since we've settled this area. We've taken out a lot of species by overfishing that were originally there. Number two, we've introduced competitors that are also making it very difficult for any of those species to rebound from the overfishing that was originally done. And so we've put in things like smelt, round gobies, and alewife unintentionally. And then intentionally, with our tax dollars, in fact, we've put in all kinds of non-native salmonids that are having a detrimental effect on species that are normally native in this ecosystem.
The cormorant may very well be of strong benefit to some native fish species by eliminating competing alien species that are now in the Great Lakes. And that would include the alewife and the round goby, some species of stickleback, for example, that are not native, and so on. But very, very few of the actual species of fish that either are of interest to fishermen, commercial or sport.
I think commercial fishermen, by and large, understand that they're not in direct competition or they're not losing out to the cormorant type of thing. But sports fishermen just haven't had the kind of public education to know that it's not the case. People's worry with them when they're in large numbers is that these things are just going to go to an area, exhaust the fish stocks, get up and leave the next year, go exhaust the next fish stock, go somewhere else, sort of basically moving around, exhausting things. Very few things that nest in dense colonies do that, and the reason is they're usually site tenacious, which means they keep coming back to the same site of their birth for generations. It's not in their interests evolutionarily to fish an area out, particularly not if their strategy for breeding is to breed in the same place on an ongoing basis. So no, cormorants don't have the capacity to exhaust the fish stock of a place.
These birds are killing all the trees.
There's no question that double-crested cormorants can have negative impacts on local vegetation. Nobody disputes this. I mean, other species do too. So do great blue herons. But this is part of the natural system. This has been going on since these birds existed.
The accumulation of droppings over the years are very, very bad for vegetation at the time they're deposited. But all things change in nature, and where you may have a colony here 100 years from now, you may not